Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Jack Smith.
I'm Shrikar Gendran.
I'm Anish Gupta.
Oh, and I'm a special guest over here, Raj Malwani, I guess. I didn't know it was my turn, how to order, but yeah.
You want
I
to
run
tell
the
them a little
page.
about your page?
Yeah, I run the Instagram page, Our SF49ers. Actually, I'm on Twitter, too. We've got a social media, basically media page been running for the last couple of years. So Our SF49ers, been covering the Niners since 2013, so.
Yeah, make sure to go follow his page. We're going to leave all of his ats down in the description. Okay, Raj, you want to get us started talking about the Niners offseason? You can speak on free agency or the draft. Just kind of what did you think?
Oh, man. I mean, obviously, maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a Niner fan, but I think they did a great job. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they really took together this roster and, for the most part, brought back most of the players. They said their goal was to run it back, with that team that got to the Super Bowl and came so close to winning it all, ended in heartbreak. I'm not going to talk about that. But, they said they were going to try to bring back as many of the players. Kyle Shanahan said this was like the best team he's played with. He wanted to do as much as he can. And it's hard, though, with the way free agency works and the offseason is and the business side of the game. So, unfortunately, they lost DeForest Buckner. They lost Emmanuel Sanders. Those were huge. But they were able to replace them with two guys that could be potential stars, guys that can, become the next Emmanuel Sanders, the next DeForest Buckner, and Javon Kinlaw and Brandon Ayuk. They're going to save a lot of money, which is going to help their cap space situation. And in doing so, they were also able to bring back Jimmy Ward, Arik Armstead. Those two guys were big keys for their defense. So they did a really good job overall, had a heck of a draft. And then, unfortunately, they lost Joe Staley. That was a big loss, the Niner legend. But they were able to get Trent Williams, arguably the best left tackle in the NFL anyways, who's coming off a year where he held out. So he's probably got fresh legs, ready to prove himself. He's worked with Shanahan, and they upgraded instantly at left tackle. And honestly, I see them I didn't think they really did anything bad. They got a few late round picks in the draft. Warner could be a good blocking tight end. That guy, Juwan Jennings, he fell late into the 7th round. They lost Breida, but they can replace him with some of those undrafted guys. Mostert's going to be the guy anyways. You got the second year of Dee Bost, who's only going to get better. Nick Bosa.
Yep.
They really hit the nail. They didn't really need to do a lot. That's the thing. They're such a good team. They went to the Super Bowl. They didn't need to, revamp the whole team. They just had to bring back the main guys and then fill the holes that they lost. And I think that's what they did.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
Debo Samuel.
Okay.
Debo Samuel,
Go ahead,
he
Debo.
showed he's a star in the making during that Super Bowl. But I think Kyle Shanahan's offense, they just felt like they needed more at receiver. And the team liked Brandon Ayuk so much that Shanahan and John Lynch, they seriously considered him with 13 before trading up and choosing him with 25. So now Ayuk and Samuel can be on the field at the same time to create headaches for any opponent that they play. So what are your thoughts on Brandon Ayuk and, just in general, the wide receiver room going into 2020?
So wide receiver is a big position, and I think it's going to be a huge battle. And you're right. You lose a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, like we talked about. That's pretty big. Obviously, he was the veteran leader. He really sparked a change in that locker room when Debo was there and KB were there. They were not bad, but they were still young. They were developing, especially Debo, rookie season. As soon as Emmanuel came in, you can see that the presence changed, and he really and Debo and KB really took into him, and their level of play, their gameplay changed. Kendrick Bourne, he didn't have a drop after that Seattle game. That big game, everybody was saying, all he does is drop pass. He was solid. He was a big-time third down player. Red zone target, led them on touchdowns. And he had Debo. He really took off and became the leader at wide receiver. His second year, he's only going to get better. His slant route running is great. He can run out of the backfield. He's tough. He's only going to get, more polished in the offense. And I feel like he even took like more of a leadership role. Even this offseason, the stuff he's been saying, it looks like he's really been leading that charge and he's working hard. Same thing with Kendrick Bourne. One of the things he said with Matt Mayoko over the offseason is he was so surprised at how Emmanuel Sanders worked in the offense at his age. He's 12 years older than KB, and he was always in better shape. And Kendrick Bourne only played a few snaps during the game. He's like, dude, this guy is 12 years older than me, and he's in much better shape. He said, I have to train that much harder this offseason. So if I'm going to have a bigger role in the offense, I'll be ready for it. So you see him, if you see his Instagram stories and posts, and the guy's working out 24/7. It's crazy. So those two guys really took what Emmanuel Sanders taught him. And I think Brandon Ayuk, like you said, that's the guy you guys want to talk about. is going to be an X factor. If he can learn the offense like Debo learned, this guy can be everything. Because this is Shanahan's number one receiver, his guy he wanted. Not CeeDee Lamb, not Jerry Jeudy, not all the guys that people are hyping up, not Henry Rugg, Brandon Ayuk. Like you said, Shanahan was considering taking him at 13. So when they were able to get Kinlaw and then still trade back and still get the guy they wanted, they were thrilled. And this guy, if you've seen his game tape, his game film, I mean, he's unbelievable. After the catch, that's what Shanahan wants. He wants you to get the yak guys, the guys that just you can't tackle him down. He's got a long arm span, 81-inch wingspan. That's almost Calvin Johnson type. I mean, it's crazy. He's fast. He runs a good route. The guy's good after the catch. I mean, he's everything Shanahan wants, and I think he could become, a big-time player in this offense. Of course, he's got to learn it. Then you got guys that people aren't even talking about. Trent Taylor, if he comes back from injury, he can be an X factor, third down guy. Him and Jimmy had good chemistry. Then you had my man Jalen Hurd, who last season, that preseason game, he took everybody by storm, and we were like, oh my God, this is the next big thing. And the back injury derailed him. So Jalen Hurd, you got Richie James. Is he going to be able to step in? He was a spark plug when they played him. And then you got Dante Pettis. He fell off last year, mental struggles. He's going to get a chance. He's in the doghouse, but I mean, he was a second-round pick. So they have a lot of talent. They don't have a lot of roster spots. So somebody good's going to get cut or something. So it's tough.
Got a couple questions for you, kind of looking on the Niners offseason, Rod. When I look at it, this was a team, I mean, a lot of people have made comparisons to 2012, just like the journey that they took. Obviously, it's a whole different roster. They're a lot younger now than they were in 2012. Obviously, we kind of remember that team. But, when I look at this free agency, and I think they did a lot of moves to kind of keep their core intact. And I think it all comes down to the defensive line, right? That's what really fueled this team to its success. I think it allowed for their secondary to do well with Jimmy Ward, Richard Sherman, all them guys, Jaquaski Tart, all these guys up in there, especially their linebacking core, right? Fred Warner, who Jack doesn't really like. I highly disagree, but that's a story for another day. Yeah, I know.
We might have some fights in here then.
Exactly. I mean, I'm telling you, I think he's a top 3 middle linebacker. Like, I'm being honest, but Jack's been on. But I think
I'm just outside the top 5.
I mean, there's a lot of argument there, but we've been talking a lot about Jack hating on the Niners, whether he said Jimmy G's not a top 16 quarterback.
Oh man,
that's blasphemy, bro. Yeah,
killing me.
But I mean, I disagree on all of Jack's points there, and I'm sure you do. But kind of going back to some of the questions I had was, one thing I was kind of unsure about was their choice to give up on Buckner and sign Armstead. So I believe they gave Armstead 5 years, 85, and they traded Buckner obviously for the 13th pick. So what were your thoughts on them essentially choosing Armstead over Buckner, right? Because I know Buckner's younger. So what were your thoughts on that, kind of seeing Buckner go, and what were your thoughts on that choice?
So first off, you took Jackie. There was a bus right here. You threw him way under it, and I love it though. And as far as Fred Warner, you guys better than Bobby Wagner, but that's another story for another day. We'll talk about it on another day. I'm just going to say that right now. Y'all will find out this year. But as far as that question, I don't think that, and a lot of people have that question, is did they pick Armstead over DeForest Buckner and this and that? That's not what it was down to. It honestly comes down to the money. And John Lynch even said this was the hardest decision he's had to make as a GM. He's only been a GM for the team for 3 years. It's crazy. Exactly, that gets lost in the shuffle. He's still a young GM. He's still learning the ropes, and he's made a lot of, big decisions. This was the biggest, and he's done a lot in a little bit amount of time. 3 years, they became a Super Bowl roster from a team that was just a dumpster fire. The talent they had on that team. Yeah. Lewis Murphy, they had guys that you couldn't even – Rashard Robinson, really bad names. I'm sorry if they're listening, but, hey, you guys were not good anyways. DeForest Buckner, it was more of the money, and he wanted to get paid $21 million a year. You know what? He deserved to get that money. He's worked hard. He was through he was on this team since his rookie season, and he battled through some really bad years, the Chip Kelly days, Tom Sula. So he deserved to get paid, and the Niners knew they couldn't compensate him. $21 million, because you had Armstead, you had Buckner, and you had Kittle. Those 3 guys are all getting paid big. You can't pay all 3 of them. Too. And Bosa in 3 years, so you can't keep everybody on the roster. And unfortunately, what they had to do was they had to look at trade value. So if they're saying, okay, we got to trade one of these guys, who's going to give us the best bang for our buck? You give Armstead a trade, he may give you a second round at best, a third round, because he didn't really hit until last season. His 4th season, he took off, and he earned that money. Contract season, boom, let's get paid. Now he's got to earn it. And of course, he's getting paid the 85, but it's a lot less than Defoe was getting. So, and Defoe, you get the number 13 pick And when they look into the draft, and John Lynch is a defensive guy, he got his crown jewel. He got Kinlaw, and Kinlaw could be a guy that can be as good as Buckner, maybe even better if he hits his full potential. So that's the way they looked at it. I don't think they looked at it as, okay, we're taking Armstead over Defoe. It's more of, we can't afford to pay Defoe this much money, and if we trade him, we can get a guy that's comparable to him and put back in the line next to Armstead. And then, like you said, this defensive line was the heart and soul of this defense, of this team, really, because, they had a good secondary, one of the top-rated secondaries, but without that D-line, they're not going to get the less pressure on them. They're not going to get their opportunities create, turnovers and stuff. So that D-line was the key. So you got Kinlaw. You got DJ Jones coming back next season.
Yeah.
Ronald Blair's coming back. You got Solomon Thomas. If he can hit this season in his 4th year, that's money, And you got Dee Ford. He's a big X factor. If he can stay healthy, Nick Bosa is going to be better. And then you got Nick Bosa, 2nd year in the league. Yeah. Sky's the limit. This guy could be best player in the NFL. So to me, it's not a matter of did they pick Armstead over Defoe. It was they were looking at the future, and that's what they looked. They looked at Kinlaw is going to be cheaper. You get a guy like Kinlaw, and in 3 years, he may be Defoe anyway. So,
kind of another question off that, Raj. So, kind of switching it to the offensive side of the ball. Shrikar kind of stole my thunder here. Dee Bost Samuel is my favorite player in the NFL. These guys literally think I have a man crush on him for no reason.
I like you, man. Yeah. See, me and you.
Exactly. Hey,
off the rep. No, we got to let them just sit.
Exactly. No, because like I've been watching him since South Carolina, and seeing him get drafted was really cool. Just what he's been able to do for this team, I think gave him a spark towards the second half of the year, especially since that Seattle game, because obviously Sanders kind of goes down. They needed some help there, right? He picks it up. I believe he had 120 yards that game, then followed it up against Arizona. So we kind of touched on the receiving core, but kind of big name question on Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So kind of go to the Super Bowl. When I look back, and I know you don't want to look at it, but I remember they go up 20-10, and I actually told both of these guys, I said, you know what, if Patrick Mahomes does not win the Super Bowl and he has a bad game, is he still the best quarterback in the NFL? And, he had 2 picks, 100 yards, no touchdowns at the time. It was my thought was looking good. And then, the Mahomes magic just pulls it out, 3rd and 15, that play to Tyreek Hill. But, when I look at it, it's a mix of both. I think the Chiefs kind of won that game versus the Niners. They didn't really lose it, but they tried to put it in Jimmy G's hands. Obviously, the missed throw to Sanders. So now there's a lot of questions on Jimmy Garoppolo, right? 5 years, I believe it's $137.5 million, right?
Sure.
He's, I believe, in the 3rd year of his deal. So I kind of look at it as a make or break year. And I don't know if they should move on if he doesn't have a good year. What are your thoughts on the Jimmy G contract? Do you think this is really a hit or miss year for him?
So, there's a couple things. And obviously, there's always going to be pressure on him. He's the most disrespected and the most hated quarterback in the NFL. It's kind of crazy how much people don't give him any credit. First year.
He's a winner.
He is. He's 26-3. If you look at his record,
exactly.
That's all I got. 26-3. I don't care if he has to hand the ball off, but that's their offense. He didn't have to throw the ball. When they're beating a team by 20, 30 points, why throw the ball? Just do what's working. If they can't stop it, and that's Shanahan. But he's bailed his team out on numerous occasions. The Arizona game twice, the New Orleans game, he outbattled him. The Rams game where he throws that pass to Sanders.
So 2 third downs.
2 third down 16s.
He's done it. In his first season in the league, he came in they won 5 games, and and they were a terrible team. He took that team. They had no right winning those games. Beat Seattle when they had no right to beat
them. And Jacksonville too. They were a playoff team that
year. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, T-shirt and hat game. Come on, what about that? We put them on their on their ass. So at the end of the day, is his contract just? I think it's just. I think he's earned it. That's the market value. These quarterbacks, to get a top flight franchise quarterback, a winning guy. It's got to pay. You got to pay. And at that time, they had to do it because they were building a new team. They had to have a quarterback they called as their starting quarterback. Unfortunately, the injury came, limited his mobility a little bit. But hey, first year as a full-time starter, they went to the NFC Championship, then the Super Bowl. He wasn't perfect. He made some mistakes, but a lot of those interceptions he threw were off the receiver's hands, little drop passes. I'm not making excuses, but that's facts, Jack. And a lot of the hits. And in the Super Bowl. If you watch that game, and I've said this so many times when I went live and stuff, look, that O-line was not protecting him. On that right side, Mike Person was getting manhandled, abused. Chris Jones took advantage, and they were crashing him. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. The Chiefs won that game because they took advantage. They realized something. They made the adjustment. They make Mike Pearson their B, and it was bad. You see Jimmy was taking some hits. He got hit with the interception where he's not even looking. That shouldn't have even happened. If you're protecting your quarterback, he's going to be standing upright. So they got rid of him, thankfully. I'm not a Mike Pearson fan. They got Dan Brunskill, and they're going to slide him in at right guard. You know, that's the key, offensive line. You got to keep your quarterback up.
Exactly.
I think he'll
Offensive
get
line
better.
is huge.
He's gonna learn the offense more, and they surrounded him with talent. They got Kittle, you got Debo, you got Ayuk, you got KB who's gonna step up. You got Mostert, that run game, and it's all in that O line. If they can pass protect better, he's gonna do better. But I do see it as this is a make or break season. There's always gonna be pressure on a quarterback. They're paying him that money. He's got to continue to win. If he's 26-3, if he continues to win, it's all good. And at the end of the day, also is he's a leader, and that's one thing that the media doesn't really get. Is he's a leader of that team, and they love him. They buy into him. They all say good things. If you look at the press conferences, they always have his back. It's the media that's portraying that negativity. Oh, Jimmy's not a winner. But you know what? Kittle, Juice, Jeff Wilson Jr., Sherman, Warner, DJ Jones, Ark Armstead, they've all been off, on the record this season, off season in any interview, and they've all pretty much said the same thing. Jimmy's our guy. He's a leader. We can't do without him. I talked to Jimmy Ward myself, and he said the same thing. He says, look, I don't know why people don't like him. We respect this guy. We know he's going to lead us, and he wins 26-3, man. That's all I got to say, And if he makes that pass to Emmanuel Sanders in the Super Bowl, I know we don't like to talk about it. It's a whole different narrative. We're all talking about
that is true. That is true.
It's like you said, it was Patrick Mahomes, the elite quarterback. Oh, he lost because we were dominating that guy. We were clapping Patrick Mahomes for 3.5 quarters, and then they got some magic. Jimmy was outperforming that guy for 3.5 quarters, and then all of a sudden, it is what it is. He hits that pass to Sanders. It's another story. The catch 4, the crowd goes wild. But it didn't happen. So.
I mean, I know you don't like to talk about that pass. I kind of do because it allows me to.
No.
Biggest hater over here.
I got called out earlier. I'm not exactly a Niners hater. I don't like it when people overreact.
You are.
Man.
No, you are.
No, bro.
Hey, I like it when Streetcar has to shut up a little bit about the Niners. But so seeing him go to the Super Bowl and him being able to talk about it to me and Anish this whole time, it sucks a little bit. But I just don't want to see people reacting to the Niners. So that's why I kind of question a little bit more than other people. Do you think that this team going to the Super Bowl kind of randomly, no one really expected them to, do you think that's going to maybe change their mentality going into next season? They might take things a little bit lighter now that they're one of the top dogs?
Well, I don't think they're going to take anything lighter because this team is locked in. They're upset. They want revenge. It's the whole revenge tour, all that stuff they've been talking about. I don't think they're going to be lighter. They're going to know teams are gunning for them. They got a target on their back because every team has tried to upgrade this offseason in the NFC to beat them. That's why they're, the Saints, all these teams are trying to upgrade their weapons to take out the Niners. At the end of the day, all these people, all the rankings and stuff, the Saints are the top team. Really, not really. If you really think about it, the Niners are still the top dogs. They haven't lost anybody, really, except Sanders, and they got Ayuk. And then they've added players, like I said, Trent Taylor, Jalen Hurd. And then defense, they lost Defoe, but that defense is still strong. Fred Warner's only going to become better as he gets better, as he gets older. I know you don't like to hear, but Fred Warner's only going to get, like, all-pro material type player, You got
definitely.
Emmanuel Mosley. Emmanuel Mosley hasn't even hit his prime. You go, so you got some players they're just going to get better. Like, yeah, you lose Defoe, but Bosa's going to be 10 times better, stuff like that. So this team, they're going to have a target on their back, but I think they're going to be prepared because every season you can see the evolution. And Shanahan, too, he has to take some flack because, he didn't run the ball like they should have and, eat the clock out. But it was situational. The Chiefs made adjustments. And, as far as that pass to Sanders, I know a lot of people want to throw the blame all on Jimmy. But you know what? Emmanuel Sanders could have made the pass if he was a little faster. He sped up and put those arms out there. So it's not just on Jimmy, man. I think a little bit Emmanuel Sanders should take a little bit of heat on that pass because if it's a faster receiver with a longer wingspan, maybe Brandon Ayuk makes that catch. So,
or Debo.
I can't believe they got away from him in the second half.
He was going crazy. I genuinely thought he had a chance at Super Bowl MVP because this dude had 92 total scrimmage yards, right? And they go away from him in terms of running the football. I thought that really opened up their passing game. That opened up the entire offense because they could have done so many more things with it. And I was in shock that. In the one hand, it was like, did they fully put it in Jimmy's hands? Because I thought they should have mixed it up a bit more. I don't know if I want to blame the play calling because again, I'm still a firm believer that the Chiefs really found and exploited the team. Like I thought the Niners didn't do all the wrong things, but I mean, you have guys that it was working, right? And I think they kind of shied away from it, and I think that's what kind of cost them in the end.
I think they got a little cute there. They got a little too cute at the end. And they got away from those things. You're right. Debo Samuel, he was on pace to be Super Bowl MVP. He set the record for wide receiver rushing yards in the Super
Yeah,
Bowl.
in
Like
the
that's
Super Bowl.
if they win the game, you got to give the record breaker, and the MVP. He was well on his way. I mean, they couldn't stop the reverse. He was going all over the place, and for whatever reason, they just didn't give him the ball. And I was
As
like,
a rookie too, that's a bright future ahead.
Right?
I was screaming, "Give the ball to Debo, man!"
Exactly.
Give the ball to
I
Debo,
was
man.
too.
Oh my God, man.
I was too.
And then our boy Fred Warner with the interception. I'm like, right there, you should know Fred Warner's the best linebacker in the NFL. Come on. No other linebackers picking off Patrick Mahomes. Come on, dude. I mean,
yeah, Jack.
Yeah, come on, Jack. All right. See, I got a little bit.
Fred Warner. Oh my God.
All right, this is more player specific, but I know,
Yeah.
by the end of 2019, by the end of that season, Ahkello Witherspoon no longer lined up opposite Richard Sherman. It was Emmanuel Mosley. He started that NFC Championship game. He started the Super Bowl. And, to my surprise, I don't think the Niners didn't add anything to their secondary during the draft. They re-signed Jason Verrett, re-signed Jimmy Ward. As such, Witherspoon's status, it really remains uncertain because we need depth. And the organization will almost certainly give DeMarcus Acey, undrafted corner, every opportunity to make the roster since he fits the Niners' preferred physical profile. He started 3 years in the SEC. So, if Verrett stays healthy, that's a big if.
He's
played
that's
6
huge.
games.
Yeah.
Yep. Because he's played in 6 games over the last 4 years. And, DJ Reed, I think he's going to continue to grow as a corner. I mean, we may be comfortable moving on from Witherspoon. He's just too inconsistent, and that's ultimately going to cost him his job. Plus the Niners could save around $2 million by going in another direction. So what are your thoughts on Ahkello Witherspoon and the secondary as a whole, too?
Yeah. This is a make or break year for Ahkello, and I know a lot of people hate Ahkello Witherspoon on the Niner fan. Like, it's crazy. There's certain players that just get tons of hate, and I don't hate the guy. I think the word you used is 100% is inconsistent. Has the talent. This guy has the skills. Like, there's some games you're like, man, that was a nice play. Like, there was games where he had bad games, but he made some huge big plays. You're like, damn, man, that was a big play. And then 2 plays later, it's like, oh man, that was not a big play. So to him, it's just consistency, and I think it's all in here. It's all between the ears. For him, it's mental. When people struggle like that, it's all mental. And I think the thing that really decreased his abilities last season, it kind of brought him down, was the fact that he got hurt early on. And I think it mentally just shook his confidence because he was coming in those first 3 games, man, he was looking like a Pro Bowl corner. I mean, against the Bucks, he had that big pick, and then against Bengals, he was just knocking things down. He was doing great. In that Steelers game, he was playing all over the field and doing good until he got hurt. And then after that game, he missed some time. His injury took longer to recover. They said it was only maybe 2 weeks, turned into 4, turned into 5, turned into 6. He came back, and, he just didn't feel right out there. And you could tell they shook his confidence. And then you got a guy, Emmanuel Mosley. Let's talk about Emmanuel Mosley. This is the guy I think is going to take a huge step and have a breakout season. And there's people that say breakout player on off. To me, Emmanuel Mosley is locked in for a huge year. It's his 2nd year. Now, finally, he's going to get to probably start from the beginning. And he's been soaking it all up from Richard Sherman. He's a very physical corner like Sherman. He understands the press coverage technique. And a Mosley, man, undrafted player, and he's making the most of his chances. That's the type of guy that Shanahan gets. He gets those undrafted guys, those late round guys, and he turns them into gems because they know they're going to work harder than anybody on the team. Just like AC, I think that's a guy that really could come in, and if he can really step up and hone his technique, he can be a big part of that secondary in the future. So that's why I don't think they went all out this year on secondary. And again, Jimmy Ward came back. Jaquaski Tart, it's just his contract season. So can he have a big season? They're probably banking on him to have a big season. And he was pretty good. When he wasn't in the lineup, you could see the difference because Marcel Harris, he's a spark plug type guy, but his coverage skills weren't as good as Tart, and Tart made some big plays here and there. And then as far as other guys that people may not know, Tim Harris, they drafted him last year, Virginia. He was their last pick they drafted last year, and he was on the injured reserve. They kind of stashed him, redshirted him. That's a guy that's very physical, and he fits the mold. So Tim Harris could be a guy. And again, you said DJ Reed. So they got some guys there that they could develop. But my thinking is if Richard Sherman, this is his last year in his contract, if he either doesn't come back or if he switches to safety or whatever, then they're going to go all out on a big-time corner. I think that's how they're going to do it. Like they did with Joe Staley. He left. You replace him with the Trent Williams. So let's say next season, let's say for all intents and purposes, Sherman says, I still want to play football. I'm going to move to safety. Jaquaski Tart contract, they don't bring him back. You move Sherman to safety. You got Jimmy Ward and Sherman. Boom, then you go all out on a big-time corner. So at the end of the day, it still is make or break for Witherspoon. So and then they got to say Is it going to be Witherspoon and Mosley? I don't think so. I think it's going to be Mosley and whoever they bring in to that other spot. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, next year is a completely stacked free agency class, so chances are a top-level corner will be there, and the Niners will for sure want to pounce on him. All right, now let's move on to the awards. We're going to go over offensive and defensive player of the year for the Niners. Same thing with rookies, and then we'll round it out with a comeback player of the year. So, Raj, if you want to start us off, give us your offensive and defensive player of the year positions solely for the Niners.
Offensive player of the year, the offense has got to roll through George Kittle. I think they're going to do enough to make sure he's more of a focal point, because I know he does a lot in the blocking game. That's the thing. He's such a complete tight end. He doesn't just go out there and dominate people and catch the ball and, do his whole yak thing where, he stiff arms the defenders. But he's so important in that run game. But I think what they're going to do this season, they drafted Warner. They got Ross Dwelly. They got a lot of blocking pieces in their offense. I think they're going to try to make Kittle even more involved in the offense in the passing game. So George Kittle, he's got to be their MVP. He's their most important player on their offense. He's their best player on their offense. I think George Kittle has a huge season, third year in the league last year, and he tore it up. I think he's only going to get better. He's entering his prime. It's all George Kittle on offense. I mean, they're good. They're going to run it right through him. And then defense, it's Nick Bosa, hands down. Second year in the league. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. Sky's the limit. This guy might just blow up and become the best defensive player in the NFL. He has that type of talent. Hands down, Nick Bosa is going to be the leader eventually of this defense. A close second is Fred Warner, though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure, you want to go?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you completely. Offensive player of the year, I got to go George Kittle. Best tight end in the league. I don't want to hear that Kelsey's better. If we're talking about an all-around tight end, he is the best tight end in the NFL. An all-around tight end.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with him for Offensive Player of the Year. I really hope he gets the money he deserves from us this offseason. Really hope he re-signs. And then Defensive Player of the Year, I also agree. I'm going with Nick Bosa. I've talked about this before, but he hasn't really hit that. He never really hit that rookie ceiling. He has so much potential. I'm excited to see what he does for us.
Yeah.
So for Offensive Player of the Year, kind of shot at Jack here because he thinks Kelsey is better. I'm sorry, but you are wrong. Dead wrong.
Man,
because, again, George Kittle is a better blocker, and I don't think it's even close. I don't think any tight end comes close. And I think, again, for me at least, I think I've said this on every episode, Raj. I tell these two guys all the time. Offensive line and blocking, at least for me, is one of the most important facets of an offense. I think that is one of the easily a top three factor in terms of just offensive scheme, offensive plays, just how you run your offense in general. And George Kittle is just a huge, huge factor of that because obviously, right, both the tackles for the Niners were battling injuries, Staley and McGlinchey, right? But George Kittle was a consistent one there. Obviously, he missed a couple of games, but still they were able to run the ball effectively, whether it was Breida, Mostert, Coleman, right? All these guys, even Jeff Wilson Jr. got in on some of that action. So, George Kittle was a huge part of that, and I got to give him the Offensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going to kind of steal your guy, Rod. I'm going to say Fred Warner, and I know Jack hates him, but he is a stud. I think he's going to hit. I think he's going to hit 130 tackles. I'm expecting.
The thing with amazing. I think so too, man. Fred Warner is. This is the thing. He's not just a good linebacker. He's a leader of that defense. He's the Mike linebacker. So he's out there calling the play, calling the shots. They listen to him. He's picking the guys up. He's telling them where to line up. Fred Warner is so important. So I could see that's why he's my number 2. I just feel like Bosa is going to hit this incredible high ceiling. You're like, oh my God, this guy's so good. Nick Bosa is so good. So that's why I got Bosa ahead of him. And you're right, Kittle, man, he was like an extra lineman out there. Like you said, this guy's so good. He's not just gonna run you over, steamroll you over, stiff arm your mom and dad all over the place. He's gonna come out there and he's gonna run the blocks. Clay Matthews throw you on the ground, laugh at you when he's blocking you. So he's a different beast, man.
Yeah, I think it was the 14 yards that he had in the playoff game. Like, he didn't care about that. Like, it was just about getting the win, right, and getting the job done. And I totally agree with you on the Fred Warner thing. And as a huge Ohio State fan, Bosa's only going to get better. So
Bosa's going to get better. But on the flip side, real quick, on the flip side of that whole 14 yards in the playoff thing, they got to get the ball more to Kittle, though. He's too good not to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys really said all you could about Kittle. He's my Offensive Player of the Year, too. He's no Travis Kelce. I'm going to stick with him as the tight end.
The streak continues.
Yeah, but and then Defensive Player of the Year, you say I hate him. I'm going Fred Warner. All I said is he's barely a top 5 middle linebacker, not number 2 like y'all have him. I'm still going with him for the Defensive Player of the Year, though, for the Niners. Nick Bosa come in a close second. Raj, you want to start us off on Rookie of the Year? We can finish this out real quick.
Rookie of the Year, you got to give it to my man, Javon Kinlaw. This guy's going to come in there. And I know they got a lot of pieces on that D-line. You got DJ Jones, we talked about it. We got, Ronald Blair and all these guys. But I think Javon Kinlaw is going to come in there and make his case of why they got rid of DeForest Buckner. And he's such a mauler on that line. He's so aggressive. He's so strong. And he's going to be that space heater they need. He's going to be the guy that attracts attention, and it's going to open up the lanes for Nick Bost to steam through that line. He's going to open it up for Arik Armstead. He's going to open it up for Dee Ford, who better be healthy. So I think Javon Kinlaw is going to be the biggest piece on as far as rookie. I like Brandon Ayuk. I think it's just he's going to take some time to kind of develop in the beginning stages, just like Debo. The first few games of the year, he was kind of getting used to the offense. And with how many players they have in that offense, it's not like Brandon Ayuk is going to just go crazy. I don't think he's going to go crazy on the first few weeks. They're going to kind of ease him in. But I think eventually, once he gets it down, he's going to go crazy on that offense. So
I agree with you completely. I got to go Kinlaw here. You look at the talent around him. This guy's going to thrive. I see him as a Buckner clone, kind of. And as you said before, Raj, he could be even better. Sky's the limit for this guy. I'm really excited to see what he does in our offense. And, also, could I give, a breakout player of the year?
Yeah, no problem.
Yep. All right, cool. So my breakout player of the year, I'm going to go with Dre Greenlaw here. I feel like he's the best kept secret on the Niners. He wasn't perfect, and that's kind of the case with a lot of young players. He occasionally got caught out of position, especially in pass coverage. But, he played well enough filling in for Quan Alexander. He had 92 tackles. I don't think it's unreasonable to predict that a training camp battle for the second nickel spot next to Fred Warner, he could beat Quan. Frankly, had John Lynch known Greenlaw would be such a find last year, I don't think the Niners would have handed Alexander a $54 million contract. So Dre Greenlaw is my breakout.
He's a beast. Don't forget about Dre.
Yep. Yeah, we had a redraft, and I had Dre Greenlaw going in the first round, and these guys harped me on it. I am a huge fan of Dre Greenlaw, especially that Seattle game. He just makes plays in big moments. For my rookies, you got to go with the top two picks here. I just think they'll have the most immediate impact. I think you guys already hit the hammer on the nail. So for my breakout player of the year, I wanted to go Dre Greenlaw, but you guys already know who I'm going to go with. It's got to be Dee Bost Samuel. He's already had an amazing year, but I'm telling you, year two Debo, defense has got to watch out. This dude is amazing. Just the way he can run, the way he can catch passes. He had 140 yards rushing, right? On 11 yards per carry. Can you name me a receiver that's done that? I can't name it. So Debo is an insane talent. I am so excited for what he's going to do. I honestly, I see 1,000 yards and at least 8 touchdowns from him. I am so excited for Debo Samuel this year. And I think he's going to make his case. For a top 15, maybe even a top 10 receiver this year. So
Yeah, the two rookies, you can't pick anyone else other than Ayuk and Kinlaw, so we'll move through those. My breakout player of the year, I'm going to go with Raheem Mostert just because we'll be able to see him as the number one back the whole season. We saw what he can do in the playoffs when he gets his opportunities. And I think that now with Breida gone and Mostert having an offseason where everyone sees him as the number one back, I think he'll be able to go over 1,000 yards this season. Raj, you want to give us a quick breakout player?
Yeah, real quick. So I know Debo is going to be huge, and I love Debo, and I agree with everything he said. Dre Greenlaw, same thing. I think he's going to be a big-time player in this defense. And you're right. Training camp's going to get a little interesting because I think he can push Quan for that, will linebacker spot. But my breakout player, I said it earlier, Emmanuel Mosley, E-Man. The rise of E-Man is upon us. I think he's got Pro Bowl corner written all over, lockdown corner. I think Emmanuel Mosley is going to break out and just turn heads. And people are like, oh, my God, this guy is such a good corner, Emmanuel Mosley.
Yeah, and just to kind of round out the episode, you want to give us a quick record prediction for the Niners?
Yeah, I'd say I could see us being 13-3. Honestly, I think they're going to mow through some of these teams. They do have a tough stretch, in that mid part of the season. I could see them having a hard time, well, maybe not necessarily a hard time, but a loss against the Saints. The Saints are tough. They're going to play them at home. They might catch them, and the Saints are going to be gunning for them, put the target on their back. I could see a loss there. I could see a loss to Seattle on the road. That's always a tough matchup, division game, and I do see one loss maybe potentially towards the end of the season against the Cardinals. Cardinals are a team on the rise, division game. They played the team well last season. They put us on the ropes, so I could see Cardinals loss. Those are the 3 games I can fathom them losing. That's what I see. But 13-3 at best. I think that worst, I don't think they go any worse than 10-6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in some respects, just staying on top of the mountain can be even harder than climbing it, and that's kind of the task awaiting us. Plenty of NFC teams will get a crack at dethroning us. In addition to 2 meetings with the Seahawks, Niners are going to host the Packers and Eagles, going to hit the road to face the Saints and Cowboys. But, I mean, we still remain loaded on both sides of the ball. Should be a sizable favorite in the NFC West. I don't see the Seahawks winning. I think we're going to win the NFC. My prediction here, I'm going to go with 12-4, ceiling 13-3. And I agree with you, Raj. 10-6 is the floor.
Yeah, I think you guys again made some great points. I think the floor is 10-6, maybe even 9-7. I know that's a pretty low floor, but my thing is that now that the Niners were the hunters, they've become the hunted, right? And a lot of teams are going after them. But that being said, they've got a favorable schedule. They've got some teams, but they're a really talented team. And I think their ceiling is 13-3. But I'm going to go 12-4 here. I think they might lose maybe a couple division games. But week 17, I'm telling you, I can guarantee they're going to win that game against Seattle.
Yes,
so
sir.
12-4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like an Eastern streetcar, I'm going to go 12-4. I see them splitting with Seattle, maybe losing a game to the Cardinals. I definitely have them losing to the Saints, though. I'm a big believer in the Saints this year. And then I can see maybe a loss to an Eagles or a Cowboys or a surprise team that we haven't talked about yet. So 12-4, I think they'll be perfectly content with, and they'll easily make the playoffs and win the division. But thank you so much, Raj, for coming on. It was a pleasure having you. One of the best episodes we've ever recorded.
Go follow him on Instagram.
It was good, man. You know, there's
Links
one
down
team
below.
there's definitely one team the Niners are not losing to, and that's the New York Jets. Sam Darnold's going to get his
Hey, we'll see. We'll see. Shrikar said that it's a very – hey, Shrikar predicted that they'd lose to the Jets, right? He didn't tell you about that one, did he?
It's not happening.
It's possible, but it's capped.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold might catch mono before the game, and
Exactly.
Fred Warner's going to prove Fred Warner's going to prove he's the best linebacker on the field that night, not C.J. Mosley, baby. I'm telling you. It's going to happen.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Make sure to go follow him, and we'll have a lot more episodes like this coming up. Thank you so much, Raj, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, good